Welcome to Meeting the Inconceivable, a podcast exploring Zen koans, dreams, and the creative life produced by Pacific Zen Institute. Pacific Zen has a legacy of preserving and reimagining the koan tradition to meet our own times. With a lively community of artists, innovators, and seekers of all kinds that extends worldwide, our mission is to create a culture of transformation through meditation, koans, the arts, and conversations about the deepest matters. In this episode, Roshi Allison Atwill describes the arc of a long retreat as akin to the infamous voyage around Cape Horn. She notes how we inevitably set off with grand hopes and expectations, but must also contend with real moments of difficulty, loss, and losing our way. Of particular trouble, Atwill says, is the mind that measures and compares, as it keeps us from the effortlessness of our own being and from our sense of belonging to the larger voyage of life itself. Telling the story of a particular navigator who gave up the mind that measures and compares mid-race and sails off toward Tahiti, Atwill offers a vivid scene that makes clear we're always far more free than we imagine.
Welcome, fellow sailors and travelers. Tonight, this is the last night where you'll be sleeping in the temple. So the last night of sleeping in the temple we're deep, deep, deep into the voyage. And we set off, it seems like, lifetimes ago. You've had squalls and knockdowns of your boat and been accompanied by schools of porpoises and lost sight of land for weeks and weeks. And in a way, each person takes the voyage of awakening in some sense alone, and in some sense entirely accompanied by the universe. Each person on the path has to feel the tiller in their own hand and has the sky and stars and weathers of your own ship. You have your own heart as the sextant and the navigation that you need. And no one else can know where you are or how to find your way except for you. When Tess greeted us all those days ago, and she began with getting every voice in the zendo, in the temple, into the temple, so that we could have a taste or flavor of who was on the adventure, on the journey with us. And she asked a question, and I can't quite remember what the question was. I think it was something like, what is calling to you, maybe, something like that. And she pared us down severely. She pruned us down, so we were only allowed 4 words. Some of you, as I recall, disregarded those instructions, fortunately. But I remember my 4 words, and it came to me as an image, actually. First, it was an image of a sailing ship rounding Cape Horn, Tierra del Fuego, on the southern tip of South America. And that's it's really a famously treacherous passage. I'd read that over 7,000 ships have been lost. And those are only the ones we know about making that passage. And it's where all of the currents and winds are funneled and weather funneled in through this passage between the ice and the land through the Southern Ocean. and the currents and the weather are really fierce. And the 4 words that came to me were rounding Cape Horn night. And so in some way, we're all on a solo circumnavigation of the earth. Maybe we set off when we're born and we pass through all the seas and through all the continents of our life. And we end up where we started. So our lives are not so much linear as they are like a spring or like a circle. And when we set off for Sesshin, there's a feeling of embarkation, of the kind of joy of it. Someone was telling me a couple days ago that it was like, this celebratory, like, bottles of champagne popped and smashed on the bow, and people waving hankies and confetti, and the ship's in great condition, and so am I. And we have all kinds of great hopes for this adventure. And we have something that we maybe hope for that this will bring to us. Something we want to gain, somewhere we want to get to or get away from. And you may have, just a modest goal of, I simply want to survive the voyage. Or it may be this time, even though it's such inauspicious circumstances. It's online. How could I possibly get awakened online? But maybe that was what you were hoping for. Full enlightenment. They'll write about it in the next collection. They'll write about me in the next collection of the Cullens. How this person got enlightened in this unlikely situation online. Or maybe sometimes we don't discover what we thought we were hoping to gain until we don't get it. So you may have not realized that you were hoping not to feel something, not to feel the kind of, maybe you didn't want to feel how lost you often feel. Someone told me today how one thing she definitely didn't want to feel and had seen out in the world but not seen in herself, and she just felt a kind of revulsion for it, was a feeling of hatred. And it made her, suddenly she's sitting in meditation, and this whole profound feeling of revulsion and hatred for someone in her life is a kind of sea monster. So we might see krakens. Krakens might attack your boat. Or you might have sorrows that you didn't realize, or feeling not included, and noticing that your mind is watching for signs. Some part of your mind you didn't even know was there. It was a stowaway, looking for ways in which I'm not included. And it's harder to do this online. It's much easier to find evidence when you're actually in a physical zendo, but there are ways. So I wasn't invited to something, or why did that person get called on, or why did that person speak to me that way, or why didn't I get an interview? And all of those discoveries of what I didn't realize that I had decided I needed to get. And one would be, maybe you wanted to feel important. You didn't know that until you suddenly felt unimportant and neglected. And then you've gone into a rage, and suddenly you're writing emails to every person who's on leadership. And I was thinking about this today, how when we would have sessions, in a retreat center, how there were one of the ways people would really feel they had not been considered. And there were all kinds of skirmishes, like naval battles going on. Temperature in the room was a huge thing. Windows being opened or closed. And then I thought, well, so that's not happening. But then I thought, I'm sure that's happening in your house anyway. You don't even need another person for this kind of thing to go on. So all the conditions, I guess, that's what it is that eventually you'll come into the mind having a very kind of visceral, potent experience of this shouldn't be happening. This should not be happening. So we'll put a little Post-it note of this should not be happening. And I'm going to tell you a little. I looked up what, I was thinking about the circumnavigations, because right now there's a big race going on around the world. It's called the Vendée Globe, where I don't know, maybe 40 people started out in France a couple months ago, and they're sailing solo around the world. And just in the last couple of weeks, some of them have started rounding the Cape Horn on their way. And in the Vendée Globe, you're not allowed to. It's got to be solo, and it's also you're not allowed to land anywhere. You're not allowed to make portage anywhere. And so I was looking up, like, when did this first happen? And the first solo navigation of the globe. I mean, in a way, you can think of Buddha's Enlightenment Night as a kind of solo navigation of his own psyche, where he passed through all the realms and came back. The first one is someone named Joshua Slocum, who he found an old, decrepit, abandoned, rotting boat. It was a gaff-rigged oyster sloop. And he found it was just going to seed in a pasture. And they said, well, you can have it. So he rebuilt it himself, and then he sailed solo around the world. And it took him 3 years to go all the way around. He left in 1898 and came back in 1901, I believe. No, left in 1895 and returned in 1898. And he was the first person, Joshua Slocum. His boat was called Spray. And then over the years, many people had done it, but no one had ever done it without stopping somewhere. So it was in 1968, and there was the Times of London, I believe. They made a contest, and they said anyone who can sail around the world they had a big prize. It's like $5,000, and which was a lot of money back then, and various honors, etc., that you would get. And 9 people set out on this voyage. And one of them was a Frenchman named Bernard Montessier. The 9 people started, and they set out from England, and I think they set out in Plymouth, and then they sailed south over the Atlantic and then down under the Cape of Good Hope. And by the time, even before, but they didn't even get out of the Atlantic, and 4 people had dropped out. And then one of them had set off had never sailed before. So that's like, some of you have never done a retreat before. There's a tremendous amount of courage and joie de vivre about setting off like that. I drink to you, I toast to you, those of you So this is your first voyage and you've never sailed before. No sailing experience whatsoever. One of the boats sank. And one of them is this marvelous thing that he did. It was back before they had any sort of they couldn't, there was, before computers and before satellite tracking or any of that. So the only way they knew where people were, the boats were, is they just sent out radio. Would Every once in a while they would send out radio dispatches. So this one person, he had two logs going at the same time. One, his actual log where he really was, and then at some point he made a second log that placed him much further along than he actually was. So you may be doing that, and you may have done that perhaps when you've come to see a teacher. Your actual experience was replaced by what you hoped you experienced, or you hoped that what you thought the teacher might want, or some kind of, cooking the books of your enlightenment a bit. And so he's got these two logs going, and it was a tremendously intricate and difficult thing to do because he had to do the navigation for one and the other, where he actually was and then where he was pretending he was. And it placed him much further and further ahead. And so he placed himself as the lead in the race. But eventually, a couple months into the race, they find his boat and there's no one on it. And it just has the two logs and the boat. And no one knows if he jumped overboard, if he fell overboard, if he disappeared because he couldn't bear going back to his life. We don't know. There's a marvelous little mystery that was threaded through. So at some point, there's only two sailors who are left in the race. One is Bernard Matissier, and one is another Frenchman, I believe. And after some time in the sea and after some time in Sachin, a number of people have begun come in and told me stories like there's suddenly the sounds of the birds outside, as if the whole of the universe were singing to them, or they hadn't noticed that the rose in the vase that is on their altar was of such beauty that it made them cry. So your eyes begin to be clarified, and what falls off us is our opinions, what should be here, what should have happened, what could have happened, how someone should not have painted the wall in this room that horrible color, or my neighbors should be quiet, or there shouldn't be a pandemic, or this retreat shouldn't be online. All those things start to fall away, and you start to notice where you are. Someone told me this image about the snow in the silver bowl, and she said, I guess this would be an image for it. She said, it's as if I'm holding the silver bowl. It's as if I am the silver bowl, and huge silent flakes are filling the bowl and filling me, and all of life is dropping into and filling up my being, the snow in a silver bowl. So this is something that Motissier writes about coming around, about sailing around the Horn. He says his boat drives toward the horn under the light of the stars and the somewhat distant tenderness of the moon. Pearls run off the staysail, and you want to hold them in your hand. They are real precious stones that live only in the eyes. The wake spins out very far behind, up the slopes of the seas like a tongue of fire, and the close reefed sails stand out against the clear sky, with the moon making the sea on the quarter glisten. White reflection of the southern ice, broad greenish patches of foam on the water, pointed tooth-like seas masking the horizon, dull rumbling of the bows struggling and playing with the sea. The entire sea is white, and the sky is white as well. I no longer know how far I have got, except that we long ago left the borders of too much behind. I no longer know how far I have got. You no longer know how far you have got in your meditation. So the mind that measures and compares and this is better, this is worse, this is more, this is less, this is not good enough. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. What is Zen? Snow in a silver bowl. And in the Blue Cliff record, they have a couple of images that are layered like snow falling down, and with the snow in a silver bowl. And one is white blossoms in the snow, or a white horse. A white horse enters the white flowers, or snow in a silver bowl, hiding a heron in the bright moonlight. Silver and snow, moonlight and white heron. So I guess this is a description of what it feels like to be immersed in your life, where you are wholly yourself. You are entirely a heron or a blossom or a Jan or a Chris or an owl or a bell. You're entirely yourself, and you're entirely a part of everything around you, and there's no separation. And the separation comes with, this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. And it's the thinnest veil between entering into life and being separate from life. It's just this shouldn't be happening, is the separation. And it's one little shift. This is happening. This is happening. This is happening. We got out on the trail for a walk this morning and had a grand experience of the shift there, where if you go out in public, especially if you go for walks, or I guess just anywhere in public these days, and you're walking along the trail and someone comes on a one of those trail bikes racing down, and they're not wearing a mask, and my mind is screaming, this shouldn't be happening. And then I'm off and running on all the reasons why it shouldn't be happening. And then all of the ways I would like to, all the aggression that comes with that, all the ways that person deserves to have be knocked off their bicycle or whatever. My mind is I've got a bazooka, or I've put a razor wire across he knocked him off his bike, and how how painful that is, for it doesn't change the situation except that it changes it in my heart, where I'm no longer a white heron in the white snow. Suddenly I've appeared in the world as actually as a demon and in my own heart as a demon. And then this is a kind of sinking back into myself of this is happening. And when this is happening, and there's a kind of helplessness that comes with entering into life. This is happening, that I actually can't control pretty much, many things, most things we find out. This shouldn't be happening is a way to hold off entering into my situation. It's a kind of anesthesia in a way, so I don't have to feel how exposed I am and how I can't keep myself and all the precious things safe by saying this shouldn't be happening. So I think the snow in the silver bowl, we want to, what our practice it does is it gives us the lived experience of the difference, what it's like to enter into the most difficult situations. This is happening, and how when I enter into this is happening, then I have my hands and my eyes to be able to respond. And I'm not busy doing something else, which is making my list of for the prosecution, or my list of things that have got to be done right now. So I think we'll go back and visit now Motissier, and Bernard Motissier is now in the Atlantic, and there's only 2 boats left in the race. And they're headed towards, they've done the hardest passage, which is Cape Horn, and now they've come into the Atlantic, which is this fairly much calmer, much more welcoming kind of sea. And Motissier is in the lead. And he's sailing along. And he says, he would keep, he'd write everything down in his log. He'd keep a record of what he'd seen, the albatrosses, and what was happening with his boat, and the repairs he had made, and what he was feeling about everything. And he says, and he was writing all this. He was a reporter. I guess he was going to send it off to someone who was writing articles about this. And he said, I can only give them my first log with birds, sea, daily sights, and little everyday problems. But my real log is written in the sea and the sky. It can't be photographed and given to others. There's that Zen saying, I know for myself whether it's warm or cold. It's gradually come to life out of all that has surrounded us meaning him and his boat, for months. The sounds of water on the hull, the sounds of wind gliding on the sails, the silences full of secret things between my boat and me. Like the times I spent as a child listening to the forest talk. And as he's sailing up the Atlantic, he suddenly turns his boat west instead of north. And he hails a passing ship, and he puts a note around, I don't know, a rock or something, and he has a slingshot on his boat, and he takes it and he hurls this note across to the passing ship. And they open it up, and it's a note to his London Times correspondent. It's a message to him, and it says, "I continue nonstop to the Pacific Islands, to Tahiti, because I am happy at sea, and perhaps also to save my soul." So Motissier continues on, and he goes all the way around Africa and all the way around to Tahiti, another almost complete, another half of the earth again. And he's gone for 10 months and he hasn't touched land, and he finally lands in Tahiti. While the other boat, the final boat, makes it to Plymouth, captures the prize and the prize money. And Motissier, how much merit did he earn? No merit. I'm going to leave you with poem. So I guess that's to say that that your practice is for you. Someone has told me this beautiful thing today. She said, I have two questions. Two questions have come to my mind as true questions. She said, "What is awakening?" And then she said, I believe it was, does my life belong to me? Is this my own life? Is it my life? Does it belong to me? Is my life my own? So I think the snow in the silver bowl, we want to, what our practice it does is it gives us the lived experience of the difference, what it's like to enter into the most difficult situations. This is happening, and how when I enter into this is happening, then I have my hands and my eyes to be able to respond. And I'm not busy doing something else, which is making my list of for the prosecution, or my list of things that have got to be done right now. It will be clear that life is also calling to you. It's a call and response between you and your life. And this is the Machado. Traveler, your footsteps are the road and nothing more. Traveler, there is no road. The road is made by walking. The path is made by sailing. By walking, the road is made, and when we turn to look back, we see the path that will never be traveled again. Traveler, there is no road, only tracks of foam on the sea. So I think as part of the tradition of, sometimes we do this where if any of the teachers would like to say something this evening. Sure. Maybe we'll start with you, Tess.
I feel very captivated by the image of his real log being with the sea foam, and him with the sea, and how I love what you say, that it's not only that somehow things out there might be wrong, but I was noticing how many people feel like something that's happened in the past is somehow wrong, and it's somehow stained what might be possible now. And I so love him kind of turning his boat around and going off to Tahiti to save his soul, that somehow everything that had brought him into that race was just as alive as everything that finally kind of broke him free of it. And it sort of seems like that's somehow what we're doing here. So thank you. Beautiful voyage.
I just love the sea, the image of the sea and the power of the waves. And as he's racing down the waves and I guess the dew or the water on his sails, his pearls coming down that only the eye can see. And I also like the oyster boat guy, the guy who he found this piece of junk in a field and he got it for free and he hammered it together. We had a neighbor who was a friend, and he had a similar boat in a field, and somebody had come along and written on it. I was just thinking about this yesterday for some reason. Spray painted on it, Boner's Art. And this is like a neighborhood joke, but he got it together and he went sailing. This fabulous thing where you can start with nothing, that you don't need more than you have right here to sail around Buddha's enlightenment, So I love that image. Thank you. Lovely talk.
Yes, thank you, Allison. What a great journey. And I was remembering another thing about Slocum that was really fascinating to me. He wrote a book called Sailing Alone Around the World, right? And he describes this one time when he ate something bad. He got violently ill and had to go down below, and then sailed through a terrible, terrible storm. And his experience was that someone large and, if I recall, kind of raggedy and unexpected, took the helm and sailed his boat through the storm. And when he sort of woke up out of his delirium and recovered from the illness, he was okay and his boat was okay enough. And they went on, and it kind of, that piece of the story, it leaves you, not knowing what happened. And that feels for me so much like parts of our journey, parts of my journey, where I don't know what happened necessarily, but I felt held by something that I didn't understand, and sort of came through, and suddenly the sky was blue and I was still alive.
I was struck by, was it 10 months? How long was he at sea? I don't know. And how that meant, there was nobody to talk to, was there? And so the that theme of silence that we came into this retreat with was very much with me as I listened to that story. And I'm going to Tahiti now.
Yeah, I kind of, Watesi is the great Zen hero of sailing, I guess. And I kind of feel that way about Sesshin. I think, well, we don't need to go back to Plymouth. We can just keep going. I didn't need to go back to, I like living in Sesshin. I feel like completely, it's for the good of my soul. So, yeah, I don't know. I just, that sense of timelessness and being held and the flow of things and just marvelous. So thank you.
I think that turn to the west instead of the north also struck me. Again, I've been thinking a lot about how much we think we know what's coming.
and how much we think we know where we're going, and how that's a place our minds go to so easily. And you just never know, really. He was going to the finish. At some point, he was going to Plymouth. And then Tahiti called. It was beautiful.
I was impressed by that fellow who had never sailed before, and the courage to take up your life and move forward, even though you never had done that before. And all the times where that has been true in my life, whether in practice or doing practical things that I've never done before, and how the voyage itself or the journey itself teaches you the way, and how it not happening doesn't seem to help at all, but takes you off in another direction. That when you don't know, it means being attentive to right here, what's here, so that the journey or the voyage itself can teach you.
I continue non-stop to Tahiti because I am happy at sea, and perhaps also to save my soul. Snow in a silver bowl.
This picture of awakening from Dong Shan, his fifth rank, not getting caught by it is or it isn't. Do you have the courage to be at peace with this? Everyone wants to leave the endless changes, but when we stop bending and fitting our lives, we come and sit by the fire. And this given to us by Tess today from Peter Matheson. The secret of the mountain is that the mountains simply exist as I do myself. The mountains exist simply, which I do not. The mountains have no meaning. They are meaning. The mountains are. I ring with life, and the mountains ring. And when I can hear it, there is a ringing that we share. Put them together, and there we are, around the campfire. There we are with mountains and streams, trees, coyotes, lakes, and we sing together the one song, earth songs, the dragon's murmurings into the sitting as we warm ourselves by the fire.
To support these episodes or learn more about upcoming programs and retreats at Pacific Zen Institute, visit us at pacificzen.org. You'll find details on John Tarrant's Sunday talks, our Open Temple morning meditation, and our Zen Luminaries series featuring intimate conversations with scholars, poets, and teachers of Koan Zen. Thanks for listening.